Hello, everyone, and welcome to another American Diabetes Association Be a Friend Friday chat. My name is Marley, and today I will be speaking with Jenna. She is living with type 1 diabetes, and we'll be speaking with her about her journey with diabetes and specifically her eye health, as May is Healthy Vision Month. So thank you so much for joining me, Jenna.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I feel honored.
Well, I would love to hear a little bit more about some of your background, like where you were born and raised, and when you found out about your diagnosis.
Absolutely. So I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts. I have quite the accent, but I'm going to hide it during the entire interview.
Yeah.
So born and raised in Boston. I currently now reside in Florida. And I was diagnosed as a child, believe it or not. I was 10 years old when they found out that I had diabetes.
And do you remember leading up to that diagnosis? Was there symptoms? Did something happen that led you to the hospital or anything like that?
No, believe it or not, the symptoms were stretch marks. Suddenly, I had gone from being a pretty chubby child to svelte and then back up again, and I had this weight fluctuation that was absolutely insane. And my pediatrician at the time had said to my mom, we're going to test her for everything under the sun, and we're going back to 1989. And the doctor was like, it could be Crohn's, it could be thyroid, it could be this. And finally the pediatrician said, you know what, let's test something called her hemoglobin A1C and see what it says. And at the time, the hemoglobin A1C came back at an 11.
Ooh.
And I wasn't a child that had taken an excessive amount of intake of sugar. I was a kid that was addicted to potato chips, but I thought, I don't like cake, I don't like candy, I don't like sweets. So why is this happening to me? So that was really like the only indicator that came about, that they said, your daughter has type 1 diabetes.
Wow, that's amazing that you kind of just went in for this separate, symptoms and kind of not even thinking that it was type 1. They're like, we're going to test everything. That's awesome that they decided
a complete fluke. That was the weirdest thing about it, because surprisingly, I have a very, very large family, and I am the only one for generations who has diabetes.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy how you can have, the largest extended family. I'm in a similar boat. I have a very large extended family, and I'm the only one with type 1. And I'm like, how did I get so lucky?
Right. What did I do to win this prize?
Exactly. So at the time, did you or your family know anyone else with type 1?
Well, not with type 1, but I did have relatives that had indicatively had type 2. That was based, back then the stigma was, oh, if you're overweight, oh, if you're eating too much, you have type 2 diabetes. And that's just not the case anymore. Type 1 is no longer considered the JIDDM, for the juvenile insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. Type 1 diabetes literally just means that you are on insulin. Your pancreas isn't making the insulin anymore. So back then, I had family members that were on different medications, like metformin had first come about, but there was no one in the family with type 1.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy how much we've learned even in the last 30 years about type 1 and type 2 and how they differ in that way. So if you were only 10 years old, what were some of your initial thoughts after this diagnosis? Because it kind of changes everything, doesn't it?
It really does. And there was an ongoing joke growing up in my family that, while everyone else got to go trick-or-treating on Halloween, I got a trip to Disney World.
I mean,
right? Like that was
great.
That was kind of like the way that we were going to balance it out of missing out on things growing up in life.
Yeah.
What I first remember that was probably the most traumatic memory is that you're never prepared, no matter what age you are, to have someone chase you around with a needle and vial and saying that, you need this medicine, this is what we need to do. And, this constitutes for any person under a specific age. You're never really ready for a diabetes diagnosis, because there's so much that we don't know. And yet as we age, we think, oh, okay, now we have all these doctors that we have to line up and we have to see an endocrinologist. And we know that we need to take care of our feet and we know we need to take care of our eyesight. But when you're young, you have no idea what you need to do. And a lot of that falls back on your parents. Thing is that I had both my mother and father at the time completely accessible and willing to learn about how to manage the diabetes for their daughter. And I think that's one of the scariest things for people who don't have this disease is that it not only changes the person who's diagnosed, but everyone who's around them.
Yeah, absolutely. Very similarly, I was 7 when I was diagnosed. And so, yeah, my mom was a huge, part of that diagnosis and helping me manage it and just like learning everything she could about it. Because at 7, there's only so much you can do.
Right. I mean, you're not going out to CVS or Walmart and looking for a glucometer for yourself and, comparing on the internet. Oh, should I get Relion, AccuCheck? Oh, what are the different types of, insulin resistant meds that I could take? You don't know any of this stuff.
Right.
No. And I found that growing up, the hardest part for anyone is the stigma that comes that we can't eat what we want to eat. That is the hardest thing that I've tried to get through to anyone when, I go to a birthday party and they're like, oh, there's cake, but it's not sugar free. And I say, okay, well, I can have a small slice. I can just, I can double back and say, oh, okay, well, now my glucose is 160. I'll supplement with 2 units of insulin. And that's another thing that we don't know as a child. So it's almost a guessing game in the beginning to know that, oh, my child woke up and their sugar was 91. And here we are 2 hours later. And all they had for breakfast was, orange juice and a piece of toast. And it's 240 because we didn't know back then.
Yeah, absolutely. And even now, I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm still like, this may be a little bit of a guess if I have this piece of cake or this cookie, but I'm doing my best.
Right. I'm going to try. I'm going to see how this goes and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, we'll go from there. We'll just see.
Right.
What are some like physical and mental challenges that you've found or faced over the years as a result of the diabetes?
So actually, the physical challenges that I face is that the biggest, the thing that has sustained and stayed with me all these years is the following quote, which is, it's not the disease that kills you, it's the complications. And sadly, at 40 years old, I take it back. I apologize. I was 39. At 39 years old, I suffered a stroke. I had what was called a right leukemia infarct in the thalamus. So I had a brain bleed that went on for 3 days.
Wow.
With circulatory issues, and I had no idea. I wasn't someone who wasn't active. I would walk and I would, get not a substantial, I wasn't at the gym every day, but I mean, I was active. I was a swimmer. I liked to walk. I enjoyed going out. And I ended up suffering the stroke. And from there, it kind of came crashing down. So physically, not only did I have the stroke, but then I suffered a heart attack and a quadruple bypass by the time I was 40.
Wow.
Being blind is probably the thing that has hurt me most mentally. Because it takes away your independence, and a lot of people don't realize that in the beginning. You go from having the independence and the freedom to do whatever you want, and you can get behind the wheel and you can escape any situation. And that's not to say you're in a dangerous situation. That's even a matter of, oh, I'm at this party, I don't feel like being here anymore. Hey, I'm going to head out. You lose that. I lost the ability to be able to drive to work. I lost the ability to work because of losing my sight, not because I was not because I had diabetes or I was diabetic. I had worked for years. I had gone on, I had achieved a master's degree. And now I'm in this situation where I am mentally trying to cope with the fact that I went blind and no one can ever turn to you and say, hey, sorry, you lost your sight, but you kind of knew it was happening. And I did. I ended up seeing a retinal specialist because I thought that I was seeing fruit flies in the shower, believe it or not. and I kept grabbing at them because I thought that they were in my line of vision.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out it was my sight slowly disappearing. By the time I saw the retinal specialist, I was diagnosed with glaucoma, cataracts, severe proliferative diabetic retinopathy, and neovascularization of each macula.
Mm-hmm.
So I had blood vessels growing and I had no idea. And unfortunately, in June of 2022, they each ruptured and left me with no sight.
Wow. Yeah, it's kind of like once one thing falls, it all comes
Right.
tumbling down.
Right. And it's a matter of, I thought, oh, well, this will happen and this will happen and this will happen. And I get it. And I knew what diabetes would do to me medically, but I never knew what diabetes would do to me mentally.
Mm-hmm.
That is mind-boggling to think that, okay, well, we're told at this age this could happen.
Right.
Okay, well, I'm 42 years old now, and I never thought that, I'd be like, oh wow, my hands are asleep, or oh, my feet are asleep, or oh geez, why am I so tired? Oh, my head's killing me. We're just slowly deteriorating, and it's because of the silent killer, which is diabetes. You can't
Right.
look at someone walking down the street and say, yep, they're diabetic. I can tell. You
Mm-hmm.
can't. So.
Right. Absolutely. And how do you like manage your mental health then with all of these other things going on in the background?
So that has been the biggest challenge,
Mm-hmm.
because it's such a stigma in the United States of America to turn around and say, or even ask for any sort of help mentally. To say,
Mm-hmm.
you know what, I'm drowning and I don't know what to do and I need someone to talk to. And suddenly, you're characterized and placed in this box that says, oh, well, you're sad, or you're thinking of ending your life. And none of that is really true from any aspect.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is that I'm trying to deal with this and maintain a life as a wife and a mother and a friend and a daughter. And I need help. I need someone to talk to. So I have, I've turned to a couple different support groups.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest things that I chose to do was to turn to social media and
Mm-hmm.
create a TikTok that basically talked about what it was like to live my day-to-day life by being blind, and
Mm-hmm.
just to add on top of it every other ailment that went along with it, but to still stay positive. And what I've learned is that by expressing what I'm going through, talking to other people on the internet, having messages that I receive that say, you know what, you're an inspiration. You've made me turn around and realize that this disease isn't a joke. I need to take, better care of myself. And I commend you on being so positive. And I think when you're at that brittle stage, there's
Mm-hmm.
nowhere else you can go. You have to be positive because you've hit that bottom, and you think, okay, well, it's going to happen at any time. I could succumb to this disease. And that's how I felt for years. And even learning that I needed a quadruple bypass because I had 6 heart blockages that were all caused from diabetes. It wasn't a diet issue. I was a pescatarian. I ate a lot of fish. I made sure to follow the ADA diet. I'm not a soda drinker. As I said, I don't consume sugar. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't doing anything wrong per
Right.
se. I was still compliant with with medications and things that I had to take that were, vitamin supplements, just to make sure. I was constantly checking on the glucometer 4 times a day what my sugar was. But I thought, I still need some mental help. So
Mm-hmm.
when I reached out and created the TikTok that I did, I
Mm-hmm.
thought, this is going to be my therapy. This is going to be the way that I'm going to be able to express what I'm going through, but find a little bit of humor and light in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the community is so large. I think we have really realized that in the age of social media. And you can connect with so many people from around the country and around the world
Right.
who are also dealing with similar
Right.
problems or issues.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. And I mean, I've brought to light some people who have said to themselves, I, I didn't even know that something was wrong until I went and had a checkup. And suddenly they said, the predisposition, I'm pre-diabetic,
Yeah.
and those words mean so much for something so catastrophic that can happen when you turn around and you hear from someone from either an endocrinologist or a primary care standpoint that says to you, hey, you might develop diabetes if you keep on the road that you're on. And
Right.
if it's simple changes that you can make to stop from getting something that is going to end up consuming your life, because it's not just, oh, I'll take a shot and I'll be okay. As we've said, your entire life changes.
Absolutely. And did you know much about like eye health prior to all of these experiences with your eyesight?
So believe it or not, I did. I've been in medicine for the past 2 decades.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm retired now, but I knew a little bit in regards to eye health for diabetes, but I
Mhm.
wasn't really focused on it because unfortunately, I was so oblivious that my thought was, I'm so compliant, it'll never happen to me.
Right.
That was what was going on in the back of my head. I thought, I'm compliant. I'm doing everything that I need to do. I'm not going to get hit with this eye issue. And, I kept watching out for feet. I kept watching out for problems with my hands if I would need some sort of occupational therapy. I kept watching my weight. And for a long time, I decided to go into ketosis because I thought, oh, I'll follow the keto diet. That's great for diabetics because that's what it says on the internet. And I promise you that a pound of bacon a day as a diabetic is not healthy.
Yeah.
So, it's completely it's just one of those where, you think, okay, I'm going to do everything the right way, and if I do, it's not going to happen to me, not me. And the moment that it really happened and I had to sit down with the retinal specialist, and I mean, he held my hand and he said, I'm honestly surprised you're not blind yet. And I
Wow.
said, really? And he said, you know how bad this is. And I said, no, it's not that bad. I'm only seeing floaters. And, it's so little. It's just like a little black pepper spot. And it's annoying. And suddenly that black pepper spot went to, I suddenly didn't have any depth perception. And then suddenly my peripheral vision was gone and I was localized to central vision. And now I am completely blind in the right eye and see nothing out of the right. And I
Mhm.
might see about a dime size out of the left. It's centralized. And on top of it, there's an astigmatism. I have 20 over 400 for vision. So, I mean, I see shadows. I see a little bit of movement.
Mhm.
But other than that, I haven't seen my son's face since June 7th of 2022.
Wow. And what kind of things do you do to like help prioritize your eye health? Is there much to do, or can you?
So you can, believe it or not.
Okay.
So prior to, and I'm not talking about the stage where I am, where I'm now completely blind. In the event that you go to the retinal specialist and you say to the retinal specialist, you know what, uh, I'd like to have, or even to the ophthalmologist, and you say, I'd like to have a retinal scan done just to see what's going on, because you want to make sure that there are not blood vessels growing inside the macula. Everyone thinks, oh, blood vessels, great. That means that oxygen. That's actually what we learn in anatomy when we're younger. We learn
Mhm.
that the more blood vessels we have, the more oxygen we're getting. Unfortunately, when it comes to the eyes, they're their complete own circulatory system. So once that blood vessel develops, it never goes away. And if they keep branching, they're actually taking over and they're now crossing over the macula. They're crossing into the retina. And a lot of people think, well, have a corneal transplant and then you'll be able to see again. But unfortunately, the only way to be able to see is to literally, it's called inoculation. You take the eye out and you replace it. But that's not a surgery that can be performed.
Right.
We don't have that technique. And
Mhm.
you read about, old myths and old wives' tales from back in the day where people used to perform a surgery called tooth in eye. And it was literally where they would remove a molar and place it inside of the eye, near the retina, behind the sclera, deep embedded, and then they would regain vision.
Huh.
I can promise you I've asked for this procedure.
Mhm.
And he's like, we don't do that anymore. That was, a long shot. And that was like in the 1700s.
Right.
And I thought, well, Okay, I am not the one. But what I can tell you is that if you do see an ophthalmologist and they say to you, listen, this is what's going on, and I think this is how we're going to rectify it. Forget taking lutein, and I'm so honest when I say this. Take all the vitamins that you want, but they're not going to stop you from losing your sight. You can't go home and assume that if you eat a bunch of raw carrots, suddenly the lutein in the carrot is going to restore your sight.
Right.
What I tried to do to prevent loss of sight, even though I was already too far gone, was injections directly into the eyeball, and it was called Eylea, and it's Eyelea, and it's an injection that goes into the eye and it titrates and dissipates on its own. But it's supposed to help with stopping the blood vessel development, as well as taking, certain medications that were prescribed by my primary care physician. She said, I'm going to put you on, high BP meds, which will kind of help to lower your BP, but I can't, once those blood vessels grow, there's no taking them back.
Right.
So I started with the injections, and from there, even though the injections weren't helping, they also weren't hindering.
Sure.
I did over 2 years worth of eye injections bilaterally. And then finally, the retinal specialist said to me, I want to do a vitrectomy in each eye. And a lot of people do not know what vitrectomies are. And that's simply where we go behind into the retina and place either a gas bubble or an oil bubble behind the retina, and you're clearing out surgically those blood vessels that have grown. But sadly, what comes with the cost of that surgery is that there's no guarantee you're going to have your sight again.
Right.
And I've now had bilateral vitrectomies in each eye, and my sight has not been restored. But it's also to the point where we think that no more blood vessels will grow, because once they rupture, there's no pain associated with it. You're not going around screaming, your eyes aren't bleeding like in the movies. Once it ruptures, it goes from, oh, I can see, to dark. You can't see a thing. And you're like, oh. And I mean, I get pressure headaches, but that's from the glaucoma. You need to get your eyes checked for pressure, especially if you feel as though it's in the orbit. A lot of glaucoma pain starts in the orbit and goes directly into the eye. It's eye pain, and the worst thing you can do for it is ignore it.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. So how has, type 1 and your eye health journey kind of shaped who you are at this point in your life?
I think that having diabetes for as long as I have had it, and then losing my sight on top of it, has made me probably one of the strongest people that I know. You have to be able to learn to laugh at yourself. You are going to screw up. You're going to walk into walls. You're going to make mistakes, and you have to get some sort of comic relief out of it, because if you continue to just wallow in the sorrow and be in the sadness and say, oh, well, I'm diabetic and poor me, I can't do this, or I'm blind now, I can't go here, I can't do that. I still travel. I might not be able to see the sights that I'm going to see, but I still like to get out and go places, And that's a big thing. If you know anyone who is going through losing their sight, you have to turn around and you should reach out to those people, because it becomes like we're trapped in our own prison and we don't know how to escape it. And that's one of the reasons social media was so important to me, because I finally had an audience, and I knew that I would have a comic delivery that would make them not only feel better about what they were going through, but I could also educate them at the same time and remind them that as bad as it is right now, it will get better. It just takes time, and it's really about perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important to remember. Like everything can get better, and, just keep going.
Right.
Yeah. If you could go back, what would you tell like your younger self about like your T1D and like the life that you were going to lead?
Oh my gosh. The things, I mean, this is an excellent question, and I tell you this because of the following. So when I was 23, 22, in that
Mhm.
era, I suddenly, my parents had left. So they weren't around to really take care and to manage what I was going through,
Mhm.
right? And you feel like because you don't have that watchful eye anymore, you have all the freedom in the world. And suddenly, for some reason, unbeknownst to myself, I thought, I don't have diabetes anymore because my parents moved to Florida. I took, gosh, I want to say it took 2 days for me to end up hospitalized.
Mhm.
I stopped taking the insulin. I was mad that none of my friends had diabetes and they could go out and they could party and they could do what they wanted. And, it wasn't about going out and getting drunk and participating in like illicit activity. It was about the fact that, they weren't tired at the end of the day. They could run off of, an extra large coffee with extra cream and extra sugar. And they had all the energy in the world. And
Mhm.
I wanted to live that life too. I wanted to be able to do the things that all my friends were doing. And it took 2 days for me to end up hospitalized. At that point, I was 302 pounds. I had a blood sugar of almost 800
Oof.
on admittance. And the
Mhm.
doctor came in and he said to me, if you do not change your lifestyle, you will not make it to 24. You will die. And
Wow.
I thought, okay, well, I guess I should do something. And I ended up losing 170 pounds. Sorry, 130 pounds. I lost 130 pounds on my own
Mhm.
because I wasn't going to be another diabetic statistic who was bedridden and be taken out from, on a giant overloaded stretcher. So if I could tell myself anything, especially my younger self, and
Mhm.
I would go back not into like pre or even at first diagnosis, but into my 20s, I would say, don't screw this up. Yes, you've been diagnosed with this, but you will learn to manage it and you will have a beautiful life.
Mhm.
But if you don't take care of what's going on now, you will cut your life short.
Yeah.
So make sure that you do go to your doctor's appointments. Make sure that you follow up with every single provider who you are referred to because
Mhm.
it's only going to help sustain your life. So that's what I would tell my younger self.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you tell anyone being newly diagnosed or parents of a child being newly diagnosed with type 1? I mean, a lot of those things that you just mentioned are really
Right.
important. But
Right. What I would say to anyone who is either newly diagnosed or even a parent who now has a child, and it's not necessarily, a child where they're 10 years old. Your
mhm.
child can be 18 months old, can be 6 days old, and they can be diagnosed with this disease. But what I want those people, and especially parents, to realize is that as scared as you are, as scared as we are once we're diagnosed, all it takes is working together. And your child is going to be combative as as anything,
Mhm.
especially when they're young. They're not going to understand why they can't do the things that their friends can do. But all you need is patience and education to get through it. It's so easy for us to turn around, especially myself being a parent, and say to our child, don't eat that. Don't you can't have that. No, there's too much sugar in that. No, don't do this. No, you can't have juice. It's a learning process. It's
Mhm.
going to take patience and you are going to lose your mind in the interim, but it gets better and management gets better. And we have so many tools at hand now that
Mhm.
there is no reason that anybody cannot manage their own diabetes. And it doesn't matter if you have health insurance or not. We have the internet, we have access. You can go to the library, you can look up everything that you need to know and make sure that when you remember when you're diagnosed with diabetes, you are no longer living to eat. You eat to live.
Mhm.
you know that's
Mhm.
that's the biggest problem, is that sometimes our eyes are bigger than our stomach, and we want to engorge and we can't anymore, you know? So follow the diet, listen to the providers, and please, please take your medicine as scheduled.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with everything you just said. And I cannot thank you enough for sharing your story and your journey, and
Oh, thank you, Marley. I truly appreciate it.
especially on, May being Healthy Vision Month, and May is also Mental Health Awareness Month. I think
Yes.
this is a very timely conversation. And I just thank you so much for giving us your insight and your journey. And it's amazing what you've done in
Oh,
your
well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I never thought that I would be at the point where I am now in my life, especially where I'm gaining the notoriety and the fame on TikTok. And I'm like, what? What do you mean you know me? You don't know me. So
You don't know
it's
me?
definitely been different.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're an inspiration through and through, and I
Thank
hope
you.
people who want to, hear more from you go and check you out on TikTok and hear your
Absolutely.
story. Um,
Absolutely. Please. I do. I have multiple platforms. I'm on Facebook. I am on Instagram. I am on TikTok, and I'm even on Snapchat, but I'm too old for it. So
well, there you go, everyone. Well, I have to thank everyone for joining us for another Be a Friend Friday chat. And I hope that Jenna has encouraged you all to keep up on your eye health, especially during the month of May, and to just keep going and look ahead at brighter and better things, and just always keep your health in check, and keep looking back at our American Diabetes Association social media pages for more stories and events we have coming up. So thank you again, Jenna, for joining me.
thank you.